Before I begin, I'd love to know where you're all listening from today, so drop a comment down below. It always warms my heart to see how far these stories can travel. Now, let me tell you about a particular Sunday dinner, or rather, the lack of one for me. My own children, Michael and Sarah, along with Michael's wife, Claire, held a family gathering in my home, using my dishes, my utilities, basking in the warmth of the house Arthur and I built with our bare hands and tireless spirits. And when it was all said and done, when the laughter had faded and the dishwasher was humming, they didn't save me a plate. Not a scrap. It was as if I, the matriarch, the one who had poured her life into them, was invisible. That empty space at the table, that casual, almost cruel oversight, was the grain of sand that finally tipped the scales. They thought I was just a frail old woman, a relic of the past, someone to be managed rather than cherished. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. Because if they couldn't save me a plate, I certainly wasn't going to save them a penny. This is the story of how I reclaimed my dignity, my home, and my peace, and how my dear children learned that underestimating their mother was the most expensive mistake they'd ever make. My name is Eleanor Vance, and for 78 years, I've walked this earth. 60 of those years were spent building a life, a family, a legacy with my beloved Arthur. He was a good man, a hardworking man. We started with nothing but dreams and a shared determination. He'd come home with calloused hands from the workshop, and I'd have a hot meal waiting, our small apartment filled with the scent of hope and stew. We scrimped and saved. Every penny counted. Every sacrifice a stepping stone. Our first child, Michael, was a blessing, a whirlwind of energy. Then came Sarah, quieter, more introspective, but with a spark all her own. I poured myself into them. I was the room mother, the carpool driver, the late-night homework helper, the mender of broken toys and broken hearts. Arthur worked 2 jobs for a while so I could stay home when they were young, a decision we never regretted. We wanted them to have more than we did, better opportunities, an easier path. And they did. Michael became an architect, his name on impressive buildings now. Sarah, a university lecturer, shaping young minds. I was so proud, bursting with it. Arthur, before he passed 10 years ago from a heart that had simply worked too hard for too long, would often look at them, then at me, and his eyes would shine. "We did good, Ellie," he'd say, his voice thick with emotion. We did real good after he was gone. The house felt cavernous, his absence a constant ache. But I had my children, or so I thought. They had their own lives, of course. Michael was married to Claire, a woman who always seemed to look right through me, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. She was all sharp angles and sharper ambition, constantly talking about investments, expansions, the next big thing for Michael's firm. Sarah was married to a gentle soul, David, but they lived 2 states away, and her calls, though regular, felt increasingly perfunctory, filled with the demands of her own career and her 2 teenagers. I understood. Life moves on. But I was still here, in the family home, surrounded by memories and, I believed, by the enduring love of my children. The house itself was a testament to our journey. Arthur designed it, and we oversaw every brick laid, every nail hammered. It had seen scraped knees, birthday parties, tearful confessions, triumphant celebrations. It was more than wood and plaster. It was the heart of our family. I kept it pristine, the garden blooming, Arthur's favorite roses thriving under my care. I wasn't a burden, or so I believed. I managed my own finances, modest but comfortable thanks to Arthur's foresight and our lifelong thrift. I still drove, attended my book club, volunteered at the local library. Yet a subtle shift had begun, a slow erosion of my place. It started with missed birthdays, then important anniversaries forgotten. Invitations to their homes became less frequent, excuses more elaborate. When they did visit, it often felt like an inspection, Claire's eyes scanning for dust, Michael's comments laced with suggestions about downsizing, about how impractical the big house was for someone like me. As if age had rendered me incapable, a problem to be solved. I brushed it off, made excuses for them. They were busy. they had their own pressures. A mother's love is a resilient thing, endlessly accommodating, endlessly forgiving. Or so I had always believed. The infamous Sunday dinner wasn't a sudden aberration. It was the culmination of 1,000 paper cuts. Michael had called a few days prior. "Mom, we were thinking of having everyone over this Sunday. Your place is just easier for space, you know?" His tone was casual, as if doing me a favor by gracing my home with their presence. "Claire's sister and her family are in town, and it's just too cramped at ours." I agreed, of course. A little thrill went through me. The house would be full of life, of laughter. I offered to cook, but Claire, through Michael, had insisted. "No, Mom, don't you worry about a thing. Claire wants to try out this new caterer she's found. Super gourmet. You just relax, relax." As if I were a porcelain doll to be placed on a shelf. The day arrived, and so did they, laden with carrier bags from this super gourmet caterer. Claire swept into my kitchen, rearranging my counters, her voice a little too loud, her instructions to Michael sharp. Sarah arrived later with David and their children, my grandchildren, who gave me dutiful hugs before disappearing with their phones. I tried to help, to set the table with my good china, Arthur's favorite, but Claire waved me away. "It's all disposable, Eleanor. So much easier. We'll just put it out buffet style, disposable. Like me, perhaps." I retreated to the living room, a ghost in my own home, listening to the chatter, the clinking of plastic, glasses, the unfamiliar music Claire had put on. The aroma was indeed gourmet, complex and tantalizing. My stomach rumbled a little. Lunch had been a simple salad, anticipating the feast. Hours passed. The sun began to set. I heard the sounds of contented sighs, of chairs scraping back. I heard Michael complimenting Claire on her choice of caterer. "Amazing, darling, truly." Then, the packing up began. Leftovers were divvied up into plastic containers for them to take home. I heard Claire say, "Oh, there's hardly anything left of that salmon mousse. It was divine." Sarah asked if anyone wanted the last of the artisan bread. A chorus of "no, thanks" stuffed. The cleaning up was swift, efficient, and impersonal. Bags of trash were tied up and taken out. My kitchen was restored to its usual order, albeit smelling faintly of expensive spices and someone else's culinary triumph. And then, they were at the door, coats on, goodbyes brief. "Thanks for having us, Mom," Michael said, a quick peck on my cheek. "Great to see you, Grandma," echoed the grandchildren, already halfway to the car. Claire offered a tight smile. "We'll clear out any straggler dishes tomorrow, Eleanor, if that's all right," as if they hadn't used disposables. I nodded, a strange numbness settling over me. The door closed. Silence descended, heavy and absolute. I walked into the dining room. The buffet table, recently laden, was now bare save for a few stray crumbs and a crumpled napkin. I went into the kitchen. The refrigerator, usually stocked, held only my usual modest provisions. Not a container, not a small plate set aside, not a single thought given to whether I might have wanted to taste this super gourmet food served in my own home. It wasn't about the food itself. I could easily make myself a sandwich. It was the stark, undeniable message. I didn't matter. I wasn't even an afterthought. I was simply the provider of the venue. The pain was a physical thing, a cold fist clenching in my chest. Tears welled, hot and bitter. These were my children, the fruit of my womb, the recipients of my life's devotion. And they hadn't saved me a plate. It was then, standing in my silent kitchen, the ghost of their feast mocking me, that something inside me fractured. Or perhaps something new began to solidify. The days that followed were a blur of quiet sorrow and a growing, chilling clarity. I replayed that Sunday over and over in my mind, each detail a fresh stab. Claire's dismissive wave, Michael's oblivious cheerfulness, Sarah's passive presence. It wasn't just about the food, was it? It was a symbol of a deeper, more insidious disregard. I began to look back, not with the rosy tint of nostalgia, but with a new, sharper lens. How many times had I rearranged my life for their convenience? How many sacrifices, big and small, had I made, assuming they were seen, appreciated? The down payment for Michael's first apartment, which was never quite repaid but gifted when Claire decided they needed a bigger place. The emergency fund I dipped into when Sarah's husband, David, lost his job, tiding them over for months. The countless hours of babysitting, the holidays always hosted at my place because it was traditional, even when my energy waned. I had given freely, joyfully, believing it was the nature of a mother's love. Now I saw a pattern of taking of entitlement. They had grown so accustomed to my generosity, my pliability, that they no longer saw me as a person with needs or feelings, but as a resource, a backdrop to their own busy lives. My initial hurt began to curdle into a slow-burning anger, an emotion I rarely allowed myself. But this was different. This wasn't a fleeting irritation. It was a profound sense of injustice. I remembered Arthur, his fierce protectiveness of me. He would never have stood for this. The thought of him, his strength, his unwavering love, somehow steadied me. He had always said, "Ellie, you're stronger than you think." Perhaps he was right. One afternoon, about a week after the Plateless Sunday, Michael called. "Mom? Claire's wondering if you'd be free to watch Leo and Mia next Saturday. We've got this charity gala, very important for my networking." His voice was breezy, expectant. Leo and Mia were his and Claire's children, aged 7 and 5. I loved them, of course, but the request, so soon after their blatant disregard, felt like salt in an open wound. "I'm afraid I have other plans, Michael," I said, my voice surprisingly firm, even to my own ears. There was a pause. "Oh, what plans?" The question wasn't curious. It was almost accusatory, as if my having plans was an inconvenience to him. "Just some personal matters I need to attend to," I replied, keeping my tone level. "Well, can you change them? This gala is really important, Mom." There it was. Their needs paramount.
Mine negligible.
"No, Michael, I can't," I said. "You'll have to make other arrangements." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. I could almost hear Claire in the background, her sharp whisper. "What do you mean, she can't?" Michael's voice, when he spoke again, was tinged with annoyance. "All right, Mom. Fine. But you're putting us in a bit of a bind." He hung up without a goodbye or "love you." That was the turning point. The casual assumption that my life was entirely at their disposal, that my no was an affront rather than a boundary. The anger I'd been suppressing solidified into a cold, hard resolve. They saw me as old, frail, perhaps a little senile, a pushover. They were about to learn that this old woman had teeth, and a mind as sharp as any of Claire's prized kitchen knives. The plate they hadn't saved me would cost them dearly. Not out of malice, I told myself, but out of necessity. I needed to reclaim not just my dignity, but my life, my assets, my future, from their grasping, ungrateful hands. The era of Eleanor, the endlessly giving, endlessly forgiving mother, was over. A new Eleanor was emerging, one forged in disappointment but tempered with a newfound strength. The first step was to understand exactly what I was dealing with, not just emotionally but financially. Arthur had been meticulous, bless his organized soul. He'd left everything in perfect order, a clear portfolio of investments, deeds, insurance policies, and a will that, at the time of his passing, had seemed perfectly straightforward. Everything divided equally between Michael and Sarah upon my death. My own will mirrored his intentions for our children. For years, I hadn't given it much thought beyond a cursory review with our old family lawyer, Mr. Henderson, who had since retired. Now those documents took on a new significance. I spent a week in Arthur's old study, a room I usually just dusted. I pulled out file boxes, account statements, property titles. The sheer volume was a reminder of our lifetime of work. The family home, fully paid off, was worth a considerable sum in the current market. The investment portfolio, carefully managed, had grown steadily. There were insurance policies, savings accounts, Arthur's pension that continued to pay a survivor's benefit. It was a comfortable nest egg, designed to see me through my remaining years without worry, and then to provide a substantial inheritance for Michael and Sarah. An inheritance they clearly already considered theirs. Claire's frequent comments about when we eventually get this big house, or Michael's casual inquiries about how those stocks Dad invested in are doing, now echoed in my ears with a chilling new meaning. They weren't just curious, they were counting on it, planning around it. The thought spurred me on. I needed a new lawyer, someone sharp, discreet, and not connected to our family's past. My friend, Agnes, from my book club, had recently gone through a rather complicated estate settlement for her sister and had sung the praises of her solicitor, a woman named Monica Sterling. She's a shark, Eleanor, but a wonderfully empathetic one if she's on your side, Agnes had said with a twinkle in her eye. Monica Sterling. The name sounded strong, capable. I found her firm online, Sterling and Associates, estate planning and elder law specialists, elder law. How fitting. I booked a consultation. Walking into Monica's office felt like stepping into a different world. It was modern, sleek, yet somehow comforting. Monica herself was younger than I expected, perhaps in her late 40s, with intelligent eyes and a calm, reassuring demeanor. She listened patiently as I recounted my story, starting with a plateless Sunday and working backward through the years of growing unease. I didn't embellish. I didn't weep, though the telling of it brought a fresh wave of sadness. I simply laid out the facts, the pattern of disrespect, the dawning realization of their entitlement. When I finished, she was silent for a moment, her gaze thoughtful. Mrs. Vance, she began, her voice gentle but firm, what you're describing, sadly, is not uncommon. But what is uncommon is the clarity and resolve you have to address it. She then asked me about my financial situation, and I produced the folders I had meticulously organized. She went through them with an expert eye, occasionally asking sharp, pertinent questions. Your late husband was a very astute man, she commented, nodding with approval at the structure of the investments. And you, Mrs. Vance, are clearly his equal in understanding these matters. Her words were a balm. For so long, I had felt diminished, underestimated. To be seen, truly seen for my capabilities was invigorating. So, Monica said, leaning back in her chair, what is it you wish to achieve? I want to be secure, Monica, I said, the words coming out with a strength that surprised even me. I want to live my remaining years in peace, without feeling like a resource to be plundered. I want to ensure that my assets are used for my well-being, and then distributed according to my true wishes, not according to their expectations. And what are your true wishes now, Eleanor? She asked softly. I took a deep breath. My wishes have changed. The idea of leaving everything to Michael and Sarah, after how they've treated me, it no longer feels right. It feels like rewarding cruelty and neglect, Monica nodded. You have every right to change your will and your estate plan, Eleanor. It is your property, your legacy. We can make it ironclad over the next few weeks. Monica and I worked diligently. We reviewed every asset, every account. She explained options I hadn't known existed. Trusts that could protect my assets while providing for my care, ways to structure my estate to benefit causes I truly cared about, perhaps even a portion for my grandchildren, but managed by a trustee, not their parents. She suggested a new will, powers of attorney for finance and health care that appointed her, or someone I trusted implicitly, rather than my children. The idea of removing Michael and Sarah as my primary beneficiaries and decision-makers felt momentous, a seismic shift in the order of things. But with each document Monica prepared, with each careful explanation, my resolve hardened. This wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about self-preservation, about justice, about ensuring that the fruits of my life with Arthur were not squandered or taken for granted by those who had shown so little regard for the woman who had given them everything. The first concrete step was to address the house. It was too large for me, yes, but more than that, it had become a symbol of their expectations. Claire's covetous glances, Michael's assumptions about inheriting it, as is it all grated. Monica had introduced me to a trusted real estate agent, a discreet woman named Carol, who specialized in selling properties for seniors looking to downsize. We met, and I found Carol to be understanding and efficient. She advised on minor touch-ups to maximize its appeal, things I could easily manage or hire out. The thought of strangers traipsing through Arthur's beloved home was painful, but the thought of Michael and Claire eventually presiding over it, after what had transpired, was unbearable. So, I signed the listing agreement. I didn't tell Michael or Sarah. Why would I? It was my house. Simultaneously, Monica and I worked on restructuring my finances. We consolidated some accounts, moved others. We set up a new revocable living trust, with myself as the primary beneficiary during my lifetime and a carefully chosen successor trustee, Monica, in her professional capacity, should I become incapacitated. The new will was drafted, precise and unambiguous. It made provisions for my funeral expenses, a few sentimental bequests to Agnes and some distant cousins who had always been kind. The bulk of my estate, however, was now directed towards two charities Arthur and I had always admired, one supporting underprivileged children's education, the other dedicated to medical research into heart disease, the very thing that had taken him. There was a small, conditional trust fund set up for each of my grandchildren, Leo, Mia, and Sarah's two children, accessible for their education or a first home down payment upon reaching a certain age, but managed strictly by the trustee, with no access or influence from their parents. Michael and Sarah were named, but only to receive a token amount, $100 each, with my love and a prayer that they might reflect on the true meaning of family, as Monica had delicately phrased it. Signing those documents felt like shedding a heavy cloak. There was a lightness, a sense of rightness, that I hadn't felt in years. During this period, my interactions with my children continued, or rather, their attempts at interaction. Michael called again, a few weeks after the rebuffed babysitting request. His tone was strained. "Mom, Claire, and I were talking. We're a bit worried about you, all alone in that big house. And you seemed a bit off last time we spoke." "I'm perfectly fine, Michael," I said calmly. "Just busy." "Busy with what?" he pressed. "Are you seeing your doctor? Are you taking your medication?" The condescension was palpable. They were building a narrative, weren't they? The confused elderly mother, needing their guidance, their control. "My health is excellent. Thank you for your belated concern," I replied, a touch of ice in my voice. "And my activities are my own affair." Claire then got on the extension. "Eleanor, dear, we were just thinking perhaps it's time we had a chat about your future. Maybe assisted living? Some lovely places nearby. We could help you find one. It would be so much easier for everyone." "Easier for whom, Claire?" I thought. "Thank you for the suggestion," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "But I am quite content where I am, and perfectly capable of making my own decisions about my future." I could almost hear her teeth grinding. The for sale sign went up on a Tuesday. I hadn't pre-warned them. Carol had advised a quiet listing initially, appointments only, to avoid a neighborhood circus. But signs inevitably get noticed. Sarah called first, her voice breathless. "Mom, David just drove past your house. There's a for sale sign in the yard."
What's going on?
"Are you okay? Are you moving? Why didn't you tell us?" The flurry of questions, tinged with panic. "Yes, dear, I've decided to sell," I said simply. "It's a big house, and I'm looking for something more manageable. But the memories. Dad loved that house. We all grew up there." Her voice was plaintive. "Indeed, he did. And I have cherished those memories," I replied. "But memories reside in the heart, Sarah, not in bricks and mortar." "It's time for a change." Michael's call came an hour later. It was not plaintive. It was furious. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Mother? Selling the house? Without even consulting us?" Claire is beside herself. "It is my house, Michael," I stated, my voice unwavering. "My decision. I don't recall needing your consultation when Arthur and I bought it or when we paid off the mortgage, but it's the family home. It's our inheritance," he blurted out, the truth finally laid bare. There it was. Not concern for me, not nostalgia, but the raw, naked greed. "Inheritance is what is left after I am gone, Michael," I said softly. "And I am very much still here. Perhaps you've forgotten that." The silence on his end was thick with unspoken rage. I knew this was just the beginning of their reaction, but I felt strangely serene. The pieces were moving, the plan unfolding, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly in control of my own life. The news of the house sale sent Michael and Claire into a frenzy. They demanded a meeting, an urgent family conference, as Michael put it in a strained voicemail. Sarah, more subdued but clearly agitated, agreed to fly in. They convened in my living room, the same room where, just a few months prior, the infamous plateless dinner had occurred. The irony was not lost on me. Michael began, pacing like a caged animal. Mom, you can't just sell the house. This is a rash decision. You're emotional. You're not thinking clearly. Claire, seated primly on the edge of Arthur's favorite armchair, chimed in, her voice dripping with false concern. Eleanor, darling, we're worried you're being taken advantage of. This real estate agent, Carol, who is she? Did you get a proper valuation? Perhaps you should let Michael handle the sale. His firm has property contacts. The audacity was breathtaking. They questioned my competence, my judgment, all while positioning themselves to take control. Sarah wrung her hands. Mom, it's such a shock. Couldn't we have talked about this first? We are talking about it now, Sarah, I said calmly, looking at each of them in turn. And let me be clear. The decision is made. The house is on the market. I have accepted an excellent offer, subject to inspection, from a lovely young family who remind me very much of Arthur and myself when we were starting out. Michael stopped pacing. Accepted an offer? You moved that fast? Without telling us. Again, Michael, it is my property, I reiterated. My financial affair. Claire leaned forward, her eyes narrowed. And where exactly do you plan to go, Eleanor? Have you even thought about that? You can't just wander off. You need care, supervision. I am moving into a charming condominium in the new Willow Creek development, I stated. It has wonderful amenities, excellent security, and a vibrant community. I've already put a deposit down. And as for care, I am perfectly capable of caring for myself. Should that change, I have made provisions. Provisions? Michael scoffed. What provisions? We are your family. We should be involved in these decisions. Yes, family, I said, my voice soft but carrying an undeniable weight. The same family who gathered in this very house, ate a feast, and didn't think to save me a single plate? A stunned silence fell. Claire's face flushed a dull red. Michael looked momentarily flustered, a rare sight. Sarah looked down at her lap. Oh, Mom, that was just an oversight, Michael stammered. A misunderstanding. Claire felt terrible afterwards. Claire did not look like she felt terrible. She looked furious at being called out. It was hardly a hanging offense, Eleanor, she snapped. People forget things when they're busy. Some things, Claire, are harder to forget than others, I replied. It was a small thing, perhaps, in your busy lives. But for me, it was illuminating. It showed me exactly where I stood. Or rather, where I didn't stand at all. I continued, my gaze steady. For years I have given, and you have taken. I have sacrificed, and you have expected. This house, my finances, my time, you have all, in your own ways, come to see them as your entitlements. That oversight with the dinner plate was merely the symptom of a much deeper ailment, a profound lack of respect and consideration. Michael tried to interject. Mom, that's not fair. But I raised a hand. Let me finish. Your subsequent actions, your attempts to manage me, your assumptions about my incompetence, have only confirmed my assessment. You are not concerned for my well-being. You are concerned for your inheritance. You are concerned that my decisions might disrupt your future plans, plans that clearly involved my assets. Claire stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. We are your children, Eleanor. We love you. Love, Claire, I said, my voice laced with a sadness that surprised me, is shown in actions, not just words. It's in the small kindnesses, the everyday considerations. It's in saving someone a plate when they are sitting in the next room. The air crackled with tension. Sarah finally spoke, her voice trembling.
Mom,
I am sorry if we made you feel that way. I truly am. Her apology felt more genuine, but it was too little, too late, and tainted by her passivity throughout. I appreciate that, Sarah, I said gently. But apologies at this stage don't change the course I've set. I am taking control of my life, my assets, and my future. The house sale will proceed. My new living arrangements are settled. And my estate plans, I paused, letting the words sink in, have been comprehensively revised to reflect my current wishes. Michael's eyes widened. Revised? What do you mean, revised? Exactly what I said, I replied. My solicitor, Ms. Monica Sterling, has ensured that my will and trusts are now structured to provide for my needs and to distribute my estate according to my own judgment, not according to familial expectation. Their faces were a study in disbelief and dawning horror. The underestimation was complete. They had seen an old woman, easily manipulated, perhaps a bit dotty. They hadn't seen the intelligent, resilient woman who had built a life with Arthur, who had managed finances, raised a family, and who possessed an iron will when pushed too far. They were beginning to see her now, and they clearly didn't like the view. The meeting ended not with a resolution in their favor, but with their stunned retreat, leaving me in the quiet of my soon-to-be former home, feeling a profound sense of liberation. The formal notification arrived at their respective homes a week later. A crisp, legal envelope from Sterling and Associates, containing a summary of the key changes to my estate plan. Not the full, detailed documents. Monica advised that was unnecessary at this stage and could invite premature challenges, but enough to convey the unmistakable message. The gravy train had not only left the station, it had been entirely rerouted. I had instructed Monica to be concise and firm. The letter stated that I, Eleanor Vance, being of sound mind and body, had undertaken a thorough review and update of my testamentary documents. It mentioned that new primary beneficiaries had been designated for the bulk of my estate, and that while Michael and Sarah were acknowledged, their anticipated share had been significantly altered to a nominal sum. It also clarified that my powers of attorney for both financial and healthcare matters had been assigned to a professional third party. I wasn't there to see their faces when they read it, but I could imagine. Michael, I pictured, would turn puce, his sense of entitlement exploding into impotent rage. Claire would likely be icily furious, her carefully constructed plans crumbling around her. Sarah, I hoped, might feel a pang of genuine regret, a recognition of her own complicity through silence. The phone calls started almost immediately. Michael's was a roar. What is the meaning of this, Mother? Are you insane? This Monica Sterling, she's clearly brainwashed you. We're going to fight this. You can't just cut us out. Michael, I said, my voice calm, a stark contrast to his hysteria. I am perfectly sane. Ms. Sterling has acted solely on my instructions I gave after much careful consideration. And yes, I can and I have changed my will. It is my prerogative. Prerogative? This is about family. This is about loyalty, he bellowed. Indeed, it is, Michael, I replied. And loyalty, like respect, is a two-way street. One you and Claire seem to have consistently treated as a one-way toll road. With me paying all the fares, I heard Claire snatch the phone. Eleanor, you listen to me. You are making a monumental mistake. You will regret this. We will see you in court. We'll prove you're incompetent. Her voice was shrill, ugly. You are welcome to try, Claire, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Miss Sterling is exceptionally thorough. I suspect you will find it a costly and ultimately fruitless exercise. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have packing to do, and I hung up. It was the most empowering click of a receiver I had ever experienced. Sarah's call was different. She was crying. Mom, I don't understand. Why would you do this? Did we really hurt you so much? Yes, Sarah, I said gently but firmly. Yes, you did. Your actions and your inactions showed me that I was no longer a valued part of your lives, merely a convenience or a future bank account. The plate incident was the final straw, the one that broke this old mother's back and opened her eyes. But a nominal sum, I mean nothing. She sobbed. It's not about you meaning nothing, Sarah. It's about me finally valuing myself, my peace of mind, and the legacy Arthur and I built. It's about ensuring it goes where it will be appreciated and do some good in the world, rather than to those who took it, and me, for granted. I am sorry it has come to this, for your sake, but I am not sorry for the decision itself. She wept some more, made vague promises of making things right, but the words felt hollow, born of shock rather than true contrition. I ended the call kindly, but without yielding an inch. The climax wasn't a shouting match in my living room, though that had been a precursor. The true climax was the quiet, undeniable finality of those legal letters, the unassailable fortress Monica had built around my decisions. It was the dawning realization on their faces, unseen by me but vividly imagined, that the game was over and they had lost. They had underestimated the quiet woman who baked cookies and tended roses. They had mistaken kindness for weakness, patience for senility. They had forgotten that even the gentlest creature will defend itself when cornered. And I, Eleanor Vance, had not just defended myself, I had redrawn the map of my life, and theirs, with a firm, unwavering hand. The shockwaves of my actions were just beginning to spread, but in the epicenter, where I stood, there was a profound and satisfying calm. The immediate aftermath was a flurry of impotent rage from Michael and Claire and sorrowful confusion from Sarah. Michael, true to his threat, did consult a lawyer. I received a letter, full of bluster and legal jargon, hinting at undue influence and questioning my capacity. Monica handled it with swift, surgical precision, responding with a polite but unequivocal letter of her own, accompanied by a recent medical assessment confirming my excellent cognitive health and a sworn affidavit from me detailing the timeline of my decisions and the reasons behind them, referencing specific instances of neglect and disrespect, including the infamous plateless dinner. She also gently reminded Michael's lawyer of the potential costs involved in a frivolous lawsuit and the public nature of such proceedings. The bluster deflated rather quickly. There were no further legal threats. Claire, I heard through the grapevine of neighborhood chat, which Agnes, my book club friend, was an excellent conduit for, was apparently apoplectic and complaining bitterly to anyone who would listen about her ungrateful, manipulative mother-in-law. It painted her in a rather unflattering light, especially among those who had known me for years and witnessed my devotion to my family. The sympathy she sought was not forthcoming. Her social standing, so important to her, took a hit. Michael, apparently, was subdued and sullen at work, his usual arrogant demeanor noticeably diminished. Their lifestyle, I suspected, had been predicated on the future windfall from my estate, perhaps even loans taken against that expectation. The sudden removal of that safety net must have been a significant blow. Sarah called a few more times, tearful, asking if there was any way to fix this. I listened patiently. I told her that the legal documents were in place, but that relationships were different, more malleable. If you truly wish to have a relationship with me, Sarah, I said, one based on genuine affection and respect, not obligation or expectation, then the door is not entirely closed. But it will require effort and understanding and a complete change in how you perceive me and my role in your life. It was a tentative olive branch, offered cautiously. Whether she had the strength or sincerity to grasp it remained to be seen. As for me, the sale of the house went through smoothly. The young family who bought it were delightful. They loved the garden, admired Arthur's design features, and even asked me for stories about our time there. Handing over the keys was bittersweet, a closing of a long chapter. But as I drove away, there was no regret, only anticipation. My new condominium at Willow Creek was everything I had hoped for. Smaller, yes, but bright, modern, and easy to manage. It had a lovely balcony overlooking a man-made lake, where ducks preened and swans glided. I joined the residence art class, something I'd always wanted to do, but never had time for. I made new acquaintances at the communal morning coffees. I started volunteering at the development's little library. The weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying, the weight of my children's expectations, their subtle disregard, the upkeep of a house that had become more of a monument to their future inheritance than a home for me, had lifted. I felt lighter, freer. There was a sense of profound relief, the kind that comes after a long and arduous battle has been won. Justice, I realized, wasn't always loud and dramatic. Sometimes, it was the quiet click of a pen signing a new will, the calm assertion of boundaries, the peaceful enjoyment of a life reclaimed. The healing had begun, not just from the hurt inflicted by my children, but from a lifetime of putting others first, sometimes to my own detriment. This new chapter was mine, written in my own hand, for my own well-being. My new life at Willow Creek unfolded with a quiet grace. The condominium, which I'd initially worried might feel sterile after the sprawling, memory-filled family house, quickly became my sanctuary. I filled it with my favorite things. Arthur's landscape paintings, he'd been a talented amateur, my collection of antique teacups, and vibrant, cheerful fabrics. The balcony became my morning haven, a cup of herbal tea in hand, watching the sunrise paint the sky over the little lake. The art class was a revelation. I discovered a surprising aptitude for watercolors, losing myself for hours in capturing the flowers from the communal gardens or the expressions on the faces of my fellow residents. My instructor, a retired art professor named Julian, was encouraging and kind, his critiques always constructive. Agnes, my loyal friend from book club, visited often. We'd sit on my balcony, share stories, and laugh more freely than I had in years. She was a staunch supporter of my decisions. "You did what you had to do, Eleanor," she'd say, patting my hand. "Some people only learn the value of something when it's well and truly gone. And some, my dear, never learn at all." Monica Sterling also became more than just my solicitor. We developed a warm rapport. She'd call occasionally, just to check in, her professional demeanor softening into genuine friendliness. She assured me that all legal matters were secure, that my wishes were protected with an ironclad defense. This gave me immense peace of mind. I even adopted a cat from the local shelter, a fluffy ginger tabby I named Arthur, in a whimsical tribute to my late husband. This new Arthur was a demanding but affectionate companion, his purrs a constant, comforting presence in my quiet apartment. The financial freedom was also empowering. Without the burden of the large house's upkeep, and with my assets securely managed for my benefit, I found I had more disposable income than I'd had in years. I contributed generously to the charities named in my new will, finding joy in seeing the immediate impact of my donations. I even started planning a small trip, perhaps a cruise to Alaska, something Arthur and I had always talked about but never managed. My children remained largely absent. Michael and Claire, I heard, were still smarting. Rumors circulated about them having to downsize their own aspirations, perhaps even sell a holiday property they'd optimistically acquired. Their silence was a relief, though a part of me, the mother part that never truly dies, felt a pang of sadness for the chasm that had opened between us. It was a necessary chasm, I knew, one I had to create for my own survival, but a chasm nonetheless. Sarah was the exception. She started calling more regularly, not asking for anything, just to chat. She told me about her children, her work, her life. She asked about my art classes, about my new cat. There was a hesitancy in her voice, a searching quality. She visited once, alone, driving all the way from her state. We had tea on my balcony. She brought me a small painting her youngest daughter had made. It was a clumsy, heartfelt depiction of a cat that looked suspiciously like my Arthur. She apologized again, more articulately this time, for her passivity, for not seeing, for not speaking up. "I was a coward, Mom," she admitted, tears in her eyes. "I let Michael and Claire's narrative dominate. I was so caught up in my own life, I didn't pay attention. I am so sorry." I listened, and I believed her remorse was genuine. I didn't offer false forgiveness or immediately revert to our old dynamic. But I told her I appreciated her honesty. "Building trust again takes time, Sarah," I said. "But you're being here, saying this, it's a start." We spent the afternoon together, a fragile, tentative truce forming. It wasn't the relationship we once had, nor could it ever be. Too much had happened. But it was something new, something perhaps more honest, stripped of expectations and entitlements. I was no longer just Mom, the provider. I was Eleanor, a woman with her own life, her own boundaries, her own strength. And perhaps, Just perhaps Sarah was beginning to see that woman and respect her. My empowerment wasn't about wielding power over them. It was about reclaiming power over myself. It was about peace, dignity, and the quiet satisfaction of a life lived on my own terms, finally. The long-term repercussions for Michael and Claire were, from what I gathered through Agnes and the occasional, carefully worded update from Sarah, quite significant. Their initial fury had given way to a grim reality. The anticipated inheritance, which they had clearly factored into their long-range financial planning and perhaps even their current lifestyle, was gone. They had to make adjustments. The whispers were that Michael's architectural firm, which Claire had been so keen to see expand aggressively, had to pull back on some ambitious projects. Their talk of a larger house in a more prestigious neighborhood ceased. Claire, whose social standing was so intricately tied to perceived wealth and influence, found herself somewhat diminished in her circle. The story of the disinherited son and the scheming mother-in-law she had tried to spin had backfired, making her appear grasping and Michael foolish for having so profoundly misjudged his own mother. There was a certain poetic justice in it, though I took no particular pleasure in their struggles, only a quiet acknowledgement that actions have consequences. They had sown disrespect and entitlement, and they were reaping a harvest of disappointment and constraint. They never attempted to contact me directly again after the initial angry outbursts. Their silence was a wall they built, perhaps out of pride, perhaps out of shame, or perhaps simply because they saw no further advantage in engaging with me. For them, I suspect, I had ceased to be a mother and had become merely a lost financial opportunity. It was a bleak assessment, but one that resonated with their past behavior. Sarah, however, continued her tentative efforts. Her calls became more regular, her tone more relaxed and genuine. She sent photos of her children, shared small anecdotes from her life, and always asked about mine with sincere interest. She visited again a few months later, this time with her husband, David, who had always been a kind man. He, too, expressed his regret for not having been more aware or supportive of me. We spent a pleasant weekend. They helped me hang some pictures in my condo, admired my watercolors, and played with Arthur the cat. There were no discussions of money, no hints about the will. It was simply family, connecting on a more human level. I found myself slowly, cautiously, letting my guard down with Sarah. The deep hurt was still there, a scar that would likely never fully fade, but her consistent effort was a balm. I saw a path towards a new kind of relationship with her, one built on a more realistic and respectful foundation. My life, in contrast to Michael and Claire's strange circumstances, blossomed. The sale of the large family home had provided a significant capital sum. After purchasing my Willow Creek condo outright and setting aside a generous fund for any future care needs, I still had a substantial amount. Following Monica's advice, I invested it wisely and also used a portion to establish a small charitable foundation in Arthur's and my name, focusing on local community projects. This gave me immense satisfaction, a sense of purpose beyond my own needs. I did take that Alaskan cruise. I went with Agnes, and we had a marvelous time, marveling at glaciers and wildlife, feeling invigorated by the crisp air and majestic scenery. It was something I never would have done while still caught in the web of my children's expectations. I was living fully, authentically, perhaps for the first time since Arthur passed. The peace I found was profound. It wasn't just the absence of conflict, but the presence of contentment, of self-worth. I had faced betrayal and disrespect, not with histrionics or destructive rage, but with quiet resolve and strategic action. I had protected myself, preserved my dignity, and reclaimed my autonomy. The lesson of the unsaved plate had been a harsh one, but it had ultimately liberated me. It taught me that sometimes the greatest act of love is to love oneself enough to say, no more. My children had made their choices, and they were living with the consequences. I had made mine, and I was living with a sense of peace and empowerment I never thought possible in my later years. My legacy would not be one of bitterness or victimhood, but of strength, resilience, and the quiet triumph of a woman who finally decided to save herself, not just a plate, but her entire life. And as I sat on my balcony, With Arthur the cat purring on my lap, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of rose and gold, I knew I had done the right thing. Not just for me, but as a silent testament to the enduring value of respect, a lesson some learned too late, and others, thankfully, learned just in time.